and so that we can start. Yep, we're good.
Great, thank you so much, Amira, and hello everyone, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everyone on the chat. It's my pleasure to be here with you all. I'm not sure how many people have actually joined so far. I think we have around 10, but that's good. We'll get going, and as we go throughout the presentation, like Amira said, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them. If I'm being diligent with my time, I might remember to pause in between sections and ask where the questions are at. But if not, Amira, keep me honest, and if there are any interesting or urgent questions you think or spot in the chat, please let me know, and we can address those.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to put this on presentation mode. Great. Can everyone see my screen? You should see a title screen that says UX design versus product design. Thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah, okay, great. Awesome, great. So again, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. In this talk, I wanted to talk about UX design versus product design. And when I picked this topic, it was something that I was thinking about and I was curious about just from a personal standpoint. And so I felt like preparing this conversation would be as beneficial to you as it would be for me. But as I went through preparing the talk and this presentation, something interesting happened. I ended up learning some things that I didn't know myself. And in fact, I went into this presentation thinking that I knew the answer between UX designers and product designers, but through my research and in preparation for this talk, I found out that there were a few things that caught me by surprise, and I wanted to share that with you today. And my goal by the end of this presentation is for you to also get an understanding of the historical background behind UX design roles and product design roles, where we're finding ourselves today, and what that might mean for you in the future. So just a very quick intro about myself. Again, my name is Ali Rushdaan Tariq, and I'm a senior product designer here in a Waterloo-based company called Xerox Incorporated. We create training and communication solutions for frontline workers at Xerox, and I've been part of the team now for almost 3 years. You can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or connect with me on Twitter. My handle is there below, and I'll show the screen again at the end of the presentation. So to start off with, I want to ask you, what do you identify today as? Do you call yourself a UX designer or a product designer? I'm curious to see where everyone's at. So if you have an answer to that, if you'd like to share, please share it in the chat right now. And I don't think I can actually see the chat, so I'm going to lean on Amira to let me know what answers we're going to get back from there. So if you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to know whether you're identified as a user experience designer today, or a product designer, or maybe something else.
في عندنا إسراء وسيد ومحمد ومازن وكريم وإسلام والإلكترونيكا كير. بليز قولوا لنا انتوا يعني شايفين نفسكم ايه، يو اكس ديزاينرز ولا برودكت ديزاينرز؟ اكتبوا بس في الشات التايتل بتاعكم، او حتى لو لسه بيجنر مش مشكله، اكتبوا برضه مثلا بيجنر او حتى جرافيك ديزاينر او اي حاجه تانية. بس هو علي عايز يعرف البول شويه، هو انتراكتيف سيشن شويه، فعايزين نعرف بس الانسرز، فبليز اكتبوا بس في الشات. في حد واحد, there's someone who said that they identify like one person. Said he's a UX UI designer. Who else, please, guys? If you have access to the chat, please do. Someone other said a UX designer. It's okay if you're a beginner, that's fine.
Yeah, totally fine. In fact, I think every one of us is a beginner at something at every stage. So it's all good.
Yes, someone said a graphic designer, someone said interaction designer.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Okay, so we're going to see a few of each of those. I heard graphics designer, interaction designer, UI UX designer. All of those job titles in some shape or form have to do with UX design and product design as well. And so let's dig into that. And to start off, let's take a quick historical look at the UX design field and how we've gotten to where we are today. So where I'd like to start, and we can go as far back as like people in ancient Greek times talking about and giving presentations to people, but I'm going to skip you all that and take you right up to 1970s, which is where I think a lot of the most relevant happenings in the early stages of the UX design field came from. So in the 1970s, Xerox Park was established, and this was an R&D lab that was funded and set up by Xerox, which is what a lot of you might recognize as the large printing and photocopying company. But believe it or not, they were in fact instrumental in giving us a lot of the things that we use and take benefit from today, such as personal computers, the GUI, graphical user interfaces that all the graphics designers are now so invested in, and the mouse. And what Xerox Park really did was it moved the computing industry from what was previously focused on academics and on research and in the military over into the personal space. So now people were able to have computers at home. And so that led to this rise of more personal computers in people's homes in the 1980s, with Apple Macintosh spending a lot more of the resources and time in building products and computers that could be used in schools and at the home. And so what this ended up creating was this need for people to understand, well, now that we're getting all these computers in everyday lives, how do we best interact with them, right? How do we use them to the best of our abilities? And how does it impact us from a social, economic perspective? And so in the 1980s is when you'll start seeing the first of these academic programs and degrees in human-computer interaction. Fast forward to 1995, and Mr. Don Norman, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with, was a cognitive researcher who joined Apple in order to help them wrap their arms around how best to make their computers and their software more palatable to the mainstream audience. He decided that he was going to be called a user experience architect. So he invented that job title for himself. Previously, they were called, human computer interaction experts or usability experts. But he decided that he wanted to be known as a user experience architect. And he ended up being the very first person to have that user experience designer moniker. Here's an interesting quote that reveals his motivation behind that. So he said he invented the term because he thought human interfaces and usability were too narrow. I wanted to create all aspects of the person's experience with the system, including the industrial design, the graphics, the interface, the physical interaction, and the manual. So he cared about that whole package. And he felt like all of that put together constitutes the experience of the user. And then fast forward to 2007, Apple comes out with the iPhone, right? And that completely changes the landscape of physical phones and devices. Previous to that, a lot of phones, were very functional. And people liked their BlackBerries and their Nokias. But when the iPhone came along, it was leaps and bounds more advanced than anything that had been on the market. And so that changed people's perceptions of what could be possible with a hardware device. But then later on in 2008, which is what I think is the truly more defining moment that less people talk about, is that Apple released the App Store, right? So when the App Store was launched, people and developers were able to create their own apps, put them onto the store, and then you had this sudden change in the culture and in the landscape of how people consume and use products, and so that led to, up until today, I would say, it led to a movement towards creating products that helped people, creating products that engaged people, and it really lifted the bar for what a designed product could be. So much so that in 2013, a think tank called the Design Management Institute released a report that showed that those companies that actually spend more resources on design actually end up outperforming the market by more than 200%, right? That's almost like more than twice as good performance on the business level if you were to be focusing your effort on a more design-centric organization, right? So the cat was out of the bag. By 2013, we had a lot of hard data showing us that design mattered. It wasn't just about making things look pretty, but it actually was good for business as well. So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about a brief history of product design. And for this one, we're going to start off with the Industrial Revolution, right? And this kind of took place between the 1750s all the way to the 1900s, right? And it started in Europe, and then it progressed into the US. And we saw all these factories being built to mass produce products that people could use in their homes, that people could use in their offices and workplaces. And really the name of the game here was, how do you produce as much of the stuff that people want as possible? By the 1940s, it wasn't just about producing them at mass anymore. It was about how do you do it efficiently, right? And then Toyota came along with their just-in-time methodology, with their Kanban methodology, which a lot of you agile professionals might already know about. They came along and they essentially said, you know what? It's not just about producing products as quickly as possible or as efficiently as possible. We need to start involving the actual human beings who are working alongside the machinery in order to put these together. So Toyota said, we need to think about the workers on the assembly line. And then in 1955, not long later, an industrial designer named Henry Dreyfuss basically said that, you know what, if we want to create great products, and if we want to create great processes that create great products, then we need to respect the users who are going to be building and using them. Here's a quote from him. He says that when the point of contact between a product and the people becomes a point of friction, then the industrial designer has failed, right? This was a huge statement. So again, keep in mind that, in the early 1900s and prior to that, products were just, manufactured and built and put into your hands, and you were expected to learn how to use them. But by the mid-1950s, it wasn't enough to just use a product. You had to be able to use it effortlessly. You needed to be safe while using it, and your needs needed to be met. And then in 1976, Dieter Rams, the famous industrial designer, also comes along and releases his 10 principles of good design. Now, keep in mind, Dieter Rams was an industrial designer, right? So he was more involved with physical products. However, his 10 principles of good design have influenced a lot of people all the way up until today in the digital product design realm. And one of the people he influenced was Johnny Ive when he joined Apple, and he invented all these great designs that we've come to benefit in our own lifetimes. From the iMacs to the phones, even the Apple Watch. Dieter Rams was highly influenced. Johnny Ive, was highly influenced by Dieter Rams's works. And he basically took all those principles and tried to make them come to life in the products that we've come to enjoy through Apple. But not just that. After seeing how beautiful these products could be made, a lot of other companies also started getting influenced and have been following in Apple's footsteps to try to create beautiful products for people. But I want to also think about another type of product design. If you go into a grocery store, every product you see in the aisles, from cereal boxes to toothpastes, they're all products, and they all have individual product teams with product managers. These people are trying to take into account all the needs of the market, and they're trying to ensure that the products that they're investing their money in creating are solving people's needs, they're getting distributed to the right channels, and they're getting priced at the right amount in order to be bought by the right people. And then those people will use the products to be able to solve problems for themselves. So this is a really key part of product design, which actually has influenced the way some product design works at technology companies today. And in fact, in the last 2 decades or so, the kind of product design that we are mostly talking about these days is digital product design, right? That's websites, mobile apps, smartphone apps, even apps that don't have an interface, right? Like things like Alexa. These are all digital products that we're kind of like thinking about these days. And so really product design is split up into these 3 types of product design. There's the industrial design we were talking about earlier, where physical products are being made. There's the consumer product goods, things like cornflakes and toothpaste. And then there's the digital products. So for the purposes of this conversation and this presentation, we're going to be obviously focusing on the digital product design side of things. So let's summarize that very quickly before we move on. So roughly speaking, we're saying that the UX design field started and has evolved to a point where we've focused on creating appropriate experiences between people and technological products or systems that they're using, right? It's about the experience that the person has with a technological product. And from the beginning, UX design has kind of always taken into account the technological aspect of it, right? There's been some form of technology. On the product design side of things, product design has mostly been focused on efficiently creating appropriate and desirable products for people. So remember, back in the industrial era, it was all about how do you create as much as possible. Fast forward to today, it's not just about creating something as quickly and as massively as you can, but it's also doing it efficiently. It's doing it in a way where the products that you're creating are desirable by people, and they're also appropriately targeted at the right people. So one designer put this in a kind of an interesting way. If UX designers put the user as the king of their conversations and their focus, then product designers take a wider look at the kingdom, right? Product designers will take a look at the market, what the industry is looking for. Is that sustainable? What budget do we have? How do we keep people engaged? So it feels like this is how UX design and product design has, up until I would say recently, been kind of thought about. Now, if you were to take a look at the last 5 years, the following things might have been true. Number one, UX designers are more research oriented, right? So they end up researching problem spaces and creating artifacts like sitemaps, information architecture diagrams, usability reports, wireframes, and all those types of things that you may already be familiar with. On the other hand, product designers might have been called more execution-oriented professionals, right? So they're creating more, visual artifacts like style guides and design systems, high-fidelity mockups, rapid prototypes, and maybe even code. Number two, UX designers may have also been thought to be thinking more about usability and accessibility and less about the business, right? So you would think that UX designers, they measure their success by looking at things like system usability scale scores or SUS scores. They're looking at, accessibility requirements from WCAG. They're looking at task completion rates, and they're measuring themselves against those things. On the other hand, product designers may have been thought to be thinking more about the business and less about usability and accessibility, right? So they're caring more about things like activation rates. How many people are actually signing up for my business or my startup or my app? How many people or how much revenue am I generating on a yearly basis or on a monthly basis? What's my churn rate like? So on the left-hand side, you'll see that UX designers create these artifacts, like we said, that are things that you may already be familiar with, like user journey maps and task flow diagrams, whereas product designers are thinking about frameworks like the AAR metrics, like awareness, acquisition, activation, revenue retention, and referral, or they're thinking about engagement models like the hook model. These are things where digital product designers, or frameworks that digital product designers use in order to take a product, look at how people are engaging with the product, and then they're tweaking the product in order to drive up or down these different metrics. Number three, people might have thought that UX designers work on short-term projects or on projects that are very tightly scoped. So things like, hey, I want to increase the conversion rates on my checkout page, or I want to reduce the bounce rates on my homepage. On the other hand, product designers are probably thought, at least traditionally, they were thought to be working on long-term, ambiguously scoped projects. So they're probably answering questions like, how do we increase engagement of long-time users? How do we increase the feeling of trust for first-time users when they're about to sign up for our product or service? And then lastly, I think there was this feeling that UX designers are typically hired by agencies or by more traditional legacy types of companies, right? So things like banks, insurance companies, governments, nonprofit organizations, or companies like IBM, where you traditionally don't really think of it as a design organization, although they've kind of changed over the last couple of years. Amazon also, you don't typically hear people say that Amazon creates beautiful products. So these types of companies you would typically expect to be hiring UX designers. Product designers, on the other hand, people would think that they are hired by modern, quote unquote cool tech startups and companies. So companies like Facebook, Airbnb, and Uber. And so when I think about those things that we just talked about, I would say that was true for my story, right? This is reflective of my truth. From 2014 to 2018, for example, I was working as a designer at an insurance company. In fact, the same company that Amira is at, Manulife Financial. And my job title by the time I left was a UX strategist over there. And I acted kind of like an internal design consultant, and I worked with a lot of internal teams. And so I never owned any one product. And then in 2018, I shifted my role and I moved to another company called Xerox, which is where I'm at today. And my title there is a senior product designer. My responsibilities are very different. I'm an in-house designer. I'm focused on a single product, and I dive deep into the engagement side of things. And I think a lot about our business as a whole. So from that perspective, you know, if you had asked me 2 years ago, what's the difference between a UX designer and product designer, I would have probably told you that. So what did I do then? In order to understand what it's like today, and I thought I was going to end up, you know, hearing the same things, I decided to look into what they're teaching in school first. So I searched for UX design degrees, and I ended up getting a whole bunch of results around the world. But I saw something interesting. If you look at, and obviously this isn't an exhaustive list, and I would recommend you to do the same. But if you look at just this screenshot of UX design degrees and programs around the world, you'll notice that not many of them actually have the title of UX design in the program name, right? You'll see names like Master of Information Architecture, or Bachelor of Arts, Master of Interaction Design. You'll see maybe one or two Master of User Experience Design, but not much, right? Most of these programs still seem to be focused on information architecture and interaction design. Now, if you search for UX design schools, on the first page of the Google results, you'll see a whole lot of results on UI UX programs in boot camps and certification programs and school curriculum. And here is an example of some of the topics that you'll learn in UX design programs in some schools. So here's one example from a college here in Toronto called Humber College. So you'll see, they have courses in Introduction to UX, Introduction to Interaction Design, User Interface, how to do user research. There is one course on project management in semester 2. I'm thinking that's where you might get a little bit of exposure into the business side of things. But beyond that, there's not much. There's a course on sociology, but in general, you don't really see much on the business side of things. Here is a course, a certificate program actually from the University of Toronto in user experience design. And again, these courses are about introduction to UX, there's information architecture, content strategy, how to validate your design, interaction design, user research, and visual design. Again, not much information here about, how to build engaging products. And so those are the two things that I learned, right, from quickly looking at those things. I found that most academic programs that teach UX, they still seem to be rooted in information design and interaction design fields from an academic standpoint. And furthermore, UX design programs that I saw and looked at don't typically have very in-depth product or business courses, right? They might have one or two courses on project management, and maybe there'll be like some courses on, economics in some programs. But for the most part, they're missing courses on things like, how do you innovate? How do you drive user engagement in products? How do you create sustainable businesses? So those aspects seem to be missing. So let's shift our attention now to product design degrees. From a product design perspective, when I searched for product design degrees, surprise, surprise, most of the products and most of the programs that came across were about industrial design, right? And remember how we talked about product design can be split up into industrial design, CPG design, and digital design? Well, most of the programs that came up with were about industrial design. In fact, I had to go, I think, 3 or 4 levels deep in order to be able to find digital design programs. If you go into Coursera and you search for product design courses, you'll find digital product design. But guess what? They're called UI UX. They're called general design programs or user experience research and design. Hardly any of them are actually called product design, which is kind of interesting. So the lessons that I learned there were that academic product design degrees seem to be focused on industrial design. Digital product design programs and courses are typically kind of presented as UX design programs, and that it's very hard to actually find purely academic programs that teach how to build sustainable and engaging modern digital products. So then I shifted course, right? We took a look at the academic side of things. I wanted to see what the market was saying. So I looked up job openings on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, what I found when I searched for UX designers, I found around 26,000, actually like 26,500 jobs worldwide, which is a bit lower than what I was expecting, to be honest, but still a lot of jobs. But on the product design side of things, I found around 74,000 jobs worldwide. A lot more, right? That's more than 3 times of the first one. But then I'm wondering, why is it that much more? And it turns out that, yeah, there were actually a lot of product design jobs on the industrial design side of things, and some on the CPG side of things as well. So the numbers are a bit inflated there. But then I found some interesting things, and I wanted to kind of do a quick exercise here and involve you as well. I'm going to be showing you a set of some job descriptions, and I'm going to ask you to guess whether this is a job description for a UX design role or a product design role. So let's look at the first one. I'm not going to read all the details here, but this job is requiring an online portfolio. And the third point is saying that they're looking for a proven track record in solving a variety of complex, interactive, consumer or commercial design problems for desktop and mobile for diverse populations with demonstrable improvements to the user experience. They're also looking for a fluency in best practices for web-based information architecture and interaction design, user-centered design process, as well as a strong knowledge of user experience principles. And then down here, they also ask for experience in Sketch and InVision and all those tools that you're probably familiar with. So let's take a guess. Do you think this is a UX design job, or is this a product design job?
Can I say something? I can see your next slide, and it's at the top.
Oh,
it
you can.
actually says the answer to that.
Can you see it? Oh, okay.
But I'm not gonna say maybe I'm the only one who can see it. I'm not sure. But still, like, كان جماعة ممكن تكتبوا في الchat أنتم شايفين الjob description دي دي اللي أنتم قريتوه ده حاسين إن هو إيه product design والّا job description لuser experience design؟ يعني بعيدًا عن الnext slide يعني بس حد يخمن يعني اكتبوا أي حاجة يعني.
Oh, I shouldn't.
It's actually very hard to distinguish. Everyone can see the next slide, but that's fine.
Oh, they can see the next slide?
Yeah.
How do is there a way I can change that?
I'm not sure. Maybe it depends on the program you're using. I don't know.
Is it show navigator? No,
it's actually very, like, assuming that I did not see the job title in the next slide, it's actually very confusing because when they say that there's a user experience and also they demonstrate like Sketch and InVision, it seems to me like it's a product design role. Which this is like how I perceive it, like from mentally from my side, when they need both like Sketch and Vision, like some design tools along with extensive experience in like in user experience and research. To me, that would define as a product design role.
Yeah, right.
That's how I see it. What did you guys, like, assuming that you did not see the next slide, how did you perceive it? If anyone can say like something in the chat, but I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I would agree. And I have a few more examples. We can actually go through them.
Yep.
But yeah, so you're right. Yeah, it was a UX designer role, and if you guys did not see that that slide, it was a UX designer role, which was interesting, right? There's a blend of the research side of things with the high fidelity mocking up as well. The next one is this one. It says the requirement for this responsibility are for design for users of data-rich, complex data products, understand user needs, gather requirements, and translate them into user journeys and interfaces, manage project priorities, deadlines, and deliverables. And this one also is a UX design role at Google. And this one maybe makes a little bit more sense, right? It doesn't go too deep into the the prototyping side of things or the business requirement side of things, and it doesn't say much about those. So maybe this is a little bit more predictable. Let's take a look at the next one. In this one, they're asking for experience designing all aspects of large-scale content management systems, including content creation and editing. They're looking for a portfolio of work that showcases excellence in interaction design, visual design, and problem solving. And then they're also looking for 5 years of design experience with a focus on web, iOS, and macOS interfaces. And they're looking for expertise in tools like Sketch, Figma, Keynote, expertise documenting interaction design details, visual design specifications, and whatnot. And this is a product. This is a role for a product designer at Apple. Again, they're looking for a blend of things on the interaction design side of things and research, and also on being able to create high fidelity prototypes. Here's another one. Experience in user-centered design with hands-on experience throughout the process, from user research to developing prototypes and collaborating on implementation. Experience in delivering wireframes, UX flows, mock-ups, interactive prototypes, design specifications, final assets, as well as personas and use case development. And again, down here, they're looking for expertise in design patterns, information architecture, Sketch, Principle, Adobe, Figma. There's a lot of different tools that they're mentioning here. And this also happens to be for a job at Apple, but in contrast to the other one, this is called a UX designer. So I don't know how many people here would have been able to tell the difference between the UX design job description at Apple and the product design job description at Apple. They almost sound exactly the same, but their job titles are different. Have just a couple more. Here is a job description again: developing and executing against a UX strategy to achieve business goals, partnering with product owners and engineering to balance the right decisions for the product with the right decisions for the user. And all this stuff about being able to articulate the rationale for your design and whatnot. This happens to be for a senior product designer at Manulife. Again, so typically people would have thought that Manulife was a traditional company and wouldn't really have product design roles, and that they would only be hiring for UX design roles, but not so. And in contrast, here is another role also at Manulife. Here, they're also saying consume and understand business, functional, and technical requirements. Conduct research to develop a thorough understanding of the targeted users and their needs, environments, and behaviors. They're talking about developing rapid interactional UX prototypes, creating usability test plans. So this is for a role of a senior product designer at Manulife. Again, Manulife seems to be hiring both product designers and user experience designers. And they both kind of have the same type of feel, maybe not exactly the same, but similar, right? There's some overlap there. And the last thing I want to show is this one, where this job description is looking for someone who is an experienced designer, loves leading, and very comfortable with ambiguity. You are passionate about creating beautiful, crafted, meaningful interfaces and interactions with clarity and precision. You understand the critical role that interaction design plays. This role, surprise, surprise, is a senior UX product designer role at Microsoft. So it's not just a product designer, it's not just a user experience designer, it's a blend of both. So what did I learn? In summary, I learned that there's no standard to these things, right? UX design and product design job descriptions have a lot of overlap amongst each other. These requirements, they can take you anywhere between, all the way from user research to understanding business stakeholders and business needs to creating rapid prototypes in Figma or, other design tools. And so a lot of these skills and requirements are interchangeable. Also, companies are starting to hire both, right? So I don't think it's true anymore that only traditional companies hire UX designers and only modern companies hire product designers. We're starting to see companies hire both. But at the end of the day, what I saw was true amongst all of those job descriptions is the ability to solve problems, right? They have always talked about that the most valuable piece of skill is that you have to demonstrate that you're able to solve real problems using your skills as a designer, whether you're a product designer or a UX designer. So I want to finish off the presentation with key takeaways here, right? What does this all mean? I would say number one, don't get caught up with the job titles, right? So don't worry whether you're a UX designer today and you're looking for a job to get into product design, or if you're a product designer today and you're looking to get into UX design. These titles, they seem to be arbitrary, right? They seem like they don't really have a rhyme or reason. So when you're applying for a job, what I would say is pay special attention to the job descriptions and the requirements instead. And don't pay too much attention to the title itself. In the future, it seems that UX and product design roles are going to start to merge. And I think they already are. But again, it really depends on the maturity of the company that you're looking at. And so it seems as though that if you're a UX designer today, you should be able to move into product design, but you might have to work a little harder to prove that you're able to solve product-specific problems. And if you're a product designer and you've worked with user research and you've created artifacts, design artifacts like information architecture diagrams and sitemaps, then it should just as be it should be just as likely that you should have an easy time switching to a UX designer position as well. A lot of people I've talked to, and including myself, have felt that UX designers don't spend a lot of time on the visual side of things, right? Like they don't spend as much time creating high fidelity mockups and style guides. But I don't think this is any longer true. I think a lot of UX designers today still create and are expected to be able to create and understand visual design principles. Number three, UX design skills and knowledge are typically served well by schools, right? We saw a lot of these programs that teach UX design principles, even if they're, in a program on interaction design or information design. But it still seems that the business focus still needs to evolve, right? So in general, schools have understood what industries are looking for, and they've been able to, rebrand some of their programs and add some new topics or courses into their programs to help bridge that gap. But still, it seems like a lot of this, the business skill of being able to create, successful, sustainable, modern digital products are being learned mostly on the job. People are sharing their experiences online in webinars, in blog posts, in conferences. And that's where I found most of the learning for, creating modern digital businesses is coming from. And number four, I think this is the most important one, is that the future will reward those people who are constantly growing and who are constantly curious, right? So the design discipline is vast, and we only scratched the surface of it today. There's a lot of things to learn, and it keeps rapidly changing. So in order to maximize your chances of finding opportunities that you find fulfilling and rewarding, you have to continue to invest in your growth. You have to continue to learn all these modern methodologies and tools, and you have to continue to stay curious. And in fact, that's what a lot of designers today are, right? If nothing, we're always super curious to learn more. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. And like I said, feel free to reach out and ask me any questions. In fact, we have some time right now, I believe, to take a few questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ali. Really, it's really have been very beneficial to myself as well. And it's also very good advices when you come to look for a job or job hunting and job descriptions, right? So it's actually very beneficial. Thank you for that. Guys, do you have any questions that would you like to ask in the chat? Please do. لو حد عنده أسئلة ممكن تسألوها حتى بالعربي وأنا هترجمها بالإنجليش، ما فيش مشكلة. اللي انتوا تحبوه، يعني حد عنده أي أسئلة في product design, UX design، أي حاجة عايزين تسألوها. There's one question that Kareem asked, what about UX nano degree Dusty program? I think it means what is maybe your opinion on that, or have you explored that program?
This is the nano degree on Udacity?
Yes.
Yeah, I've looked into it. It looks interesting. I think what they've done, I think what Google has done now, in fact, is they've shifted away from Udacity, and they've now they've created a seven-part course or program on Coursera, I believe. So it's a 7-part certification program on Coursera. And it's all each unit is focused on a different part of the UX design process. And since they released it, I think they released it last month. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's been growing. A lot of people have gone through it, and my impression is that people have found it very useful.
Right. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? أي أسئلة تانية؟ عن roles، how will product design, UX design. بسرعة يعني لو حد عنده سؤال بسرعة اسألوا في الشات، otherwise هنقفل يعني. Any other questions? I'm not getting any, so it seems people are good. I think you've been very thorough, to be honest, and you've covered lots of ground from history to like from like even guessing the job descriptions to the very end of giving like very useful and beneficial advices. So this has been really great. Thank you, and it's been an honor really to really like come and to the meetup and give your time and your beneficial knowledge as well. So thank you so much. It's really appreciated.
Yeah, the honor is mine, actually. Thank you so much. I know everyone's got a busy day, so thank you everyone on the call for taking time out of your busy days to be on this call and spend some time with me. Hopefully that was helpful.